What's up, everybody? This is Grant, that calls artist. Welcome to another episode of the Disruptors for Good podcast. And today we have a phenomenal episode with Joe Demin and Rachel Connors, the founders of Yellow Leaf Hammocks, which is one of the original social enterprises that I covered when I started the website in 2013. They sort of started really getting into flow in 2014. So I remember when and they had a couple designs out, and to see them, come this far is just their story just I think really proves just passion for what you do and just a real belief in your ability as a company and as founders and as in your mission what could be possible. They just raised $1 million after being on Shark Tank from the founder of Kind Snacks, invested $1 million into their company to help them grow and scale. And they do a really good job of talking about their journey. This is sort of the first time they've really talked about everything in a long format. Like they said in the podcast, they have really been, in the weeds on the grind for the last few years and not have talked to, a lot of outlets to tell their story. They were really concentrating on, building the company, building the products, having a sustainable impact, making sure that that part of things was in their long-term plans and that they could keep this community that they talk about in rural Thailand, all the impact that the company has made there just from consumers, believing in the product and purchasing it. The end result is a community is sort of like thriving and kids are going to college like where they've never went to college before, right? Like little things like this is a generation changing type of trajectory for a community, right? And it's just amazing. I love everything about Joe and Rachel, and I think their story is incredible. It's super inspiring. I think that's what I enjoyed most about the conversation is that look, they started with just a couple dozen hammocks, right? Selling it out of Rachel's Volkswagen, right? Talking to their customers and figuring out what the price point is. Like, what's a good price point? What would you pay for this? Is just asking people, feeling the fabrics and getting their thoughts. I mean, getting customer feedback face to face, it was just huge for them. And it was starting as small as you can start, right? Buy a dozen, sell a dozen. Buy 30, sell 30. Buy 100, sell 100, and so forth and so on. And it just accumulates over time to build a brand where the founder of Kind Snacks invests $1 million in you, right? Like, it's powerful. So I hope you love the conversation. We start from the beginning and we go up to now. We touch on so many different topics. Like it's so informative, so educational, and I loved it. So hope you guys enjoyed as well. As always, Grant at causartist.com. If you have any questions or thoughts, hope you guys have a great day and have a great week. And I will see you in the next episode. Thanks. Bye.
So usually how I like to start these conversations is about the journey.
Yeah, so I've always kind of had an entrepreneurial type career, and I was on the track to go to business school actually, which is not quite entrepreneurial for me at least. And so this is in 2006 when I graduated college. The recession was coming around. I was in corporate world for a couple of years, and I saved up all my vacation days. This 2011, I believe, and went backpacking with some friends, for like a 3-week trip to Thailand. And midway through it, I was on an island and I came across a hammock that was on in a little shop over the water, super remote. And I jumped into the hammock and I was immediately struck by how comfortable it was, how different it was from what I experienced in all my other travels. And I wanted to buy hammocks. And so I started asking questions about where is it made, where is it from? And this shopkeeper told me the story of the Malawi tribe and how they were weaving these hammocks, and how weaving hammocks they actually helped them go from being on the brink of extinction as a culture and society, to eradicating malaria in their village and providing really high paid jobs in their community. And all this positive change was being created through weaving these hammocks. And I was like, wow, this story is insane. And this is about the time Tom's Shoes was already starting to happen. So I was familiar with social enterprise, but this was a model of impact that went a lot deeper than kind of the traditional kind of handout charity model. And so I was really, that story stuck with me. And a week later, I decided I needed to go visit this village. I couldn't get this out of my head. And so I actually contacted the shopkeeper, and he was able to connect me with the weavers and the original aid worker who started working with them up in the mountains of northern Thailand. And so I convinced this cab driver to take me to this village 600 miles away. And it was also the cab driver's probably craziest day of his career as well, because he basically shadowed me around through the jungle and off-roaded into there. But what struck me when I went there, and what really inspired kind of me taking the next step, was that I got to see this home-based production model where people were like, their lives were being transformed, and they were taking control of that transformation. It wasn't being driven by anyone else other than them and this amazing product that they were creating. And people had heard how much money they could earn, how great the impact would be. And they would hike as far away as from like the Laotian border to this community. And they were being turned away because there weren't enough sales, or there weren't enough jobs, which was driven by not enough sales.
Sure.
Really selling outside of a couple of places in Thailand. And immediately I was like, well, this is a great product. I'll bring home a bunch of hammocks, and like, screw business school. Like, this is amazing. We can build a hammock company. Like, that's going to transform the world. You know, very naive. Man. So I came home with backpack stuff full of hammocks, and Rachel and I were living together at the time in Boston. And that's where her kind of nonprofit background and development work, all the next genesis of like actually making it happen came together. And that was the initial inspiration for me.
Yeah. I mean, Joe came home with I just remember like the biggest smile, a backpack full of hammocks. He had his business plan written on the barf bag from the plane. And he was like, saw no problems, saw no way this wouldn't work. It was very clear to him. And so I had the joyful position of being like a little bit of an emergency brake on the enthusiasm and saying, let's see before we make any promises, before, tell people we're going to change their lives, let's just see what people's reactions to the product are. And so one of the things that really formed the way we started the business and, informed how we run things to this day was going out and just like starting out really small. We bought a pop-up tent. We went to these little festivals and fairs. We sold hammocks out of the back of my Volkswagen for, 2 summers. Just kind of hearing what people would say, taking that feedback, and using it to shape our product offering. So like the best examples I could give would be people said, a lot of people would say, oh, I got a hammock on vacation once, but he never hung it up. And so we were always like helping people figure out how to hang these hammocks they'd already bought. And I was like, man, that's so sad. And if people get these hammocks, I want all their neighbors to get in. I want them to get in. I want this new social media thing. I want them to tweet about it. And so we every hammock now that we sell goes out with a hammocking 101 guide that tells you exactly how to hang it up. We have concierge support if you have questions, so we really ensure that people get in there and relax. Or like we heard people say, oh, I used to have a hammock, but it fell apart. And so we found the most weather safe materials and, hammocks that, fit into our version of sustainability, which is like endurance and, not needing to replace it. And so just, the first, 1,000 hammocks we sold were all person to person, face to face, have to figure out our pricing, everything. And so,
well, the other thing we learned through that time was that we did not lead with mission at all. Like, we really made a conscious decision to, first off, we wanted to like see, is Joe crazy? Like, or do other people? And what we did was we just sold the hammocks based on the merit of the product being superior. And people asked the same questions that I asked in that shop. Oh my God, this is so soft. They had like literally the same experience that I had. And it was really powerful to connect with people at that level and hear them ask the same questions and then tell them the story. And then they had already been sold on the product quality and the aesthetic and everything else. And they're like, okay. And we figured out how to lead with product first, which is what I think is really important for a mission-driven business.
And at that time, I think that was a newer idea. Like I grew up in a wonderful and globally progressive family where I was often being given, handcrafted items from people's journeys, and they just didn't have, the quality or the style that would make them something I would really use and treasure. And so that was something that we wanted to change around, kind of flip it, be product first, and the product, because it's so good, the mission becomes financially sustainable.
Super important. I think it's fantastic that you kind of looked at that early on. because I think usually that might come a little later. But I love to see the evolution of social enterprise, because that story was so perfect of what you said. Because usually I think when people think of, social impact products, they think of like, a little bracelet or something, made in Kenya or something like that, right? And it's not like a product you would see on a shelf like in Target or something, right? Like, but now I think the evolution of the industry, the products are superior to almost anything on the shelf, right? At any store you could find. The quality is just as good, if not better. And then, the mission and the sort of story behind it is then it becomes like a no-brainer for a consumer, right? Like if they're in the market for anything, but obviously we'll say a hammock, right? I mean, if you put your hammock up to somebody else's, the quality and then the story behind, like, it's almost a no-brainer for the consumer. So like early on, to get those 1,000 out the door, what were some of the learnings from that? Because that's a great sample size, right? People launch stuff with way less.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the great things was that it kind of shaped our business model in terms of like forcing us to be, we bootstrapped from the beginning, right? So Joe came home with like a dozen hammocks. We sold those. We bought 30 more. Sold those. Bought 100. And so I think that was like the best thing we could have done in terms of giving us space to explore and kind of having that growth. We lived in San Francisco for a long time where the mindset is like, where's your hockey stick? And we were, so
pressure to grow fast.
Yeah, it really instilled some good values for us in terms of growing our business and taking a much longer approach that we're now starting to see that like sharp rise in scale. But it took a lot of hustle, a lot of work. We started literally with the hammocks that I brought back. And so
neither of us had any background in retail, anything with like web development or e-commerce. We had no background in like import export. So I don't know what we had, but it wasn't anything that was particularly practical.
Yeah, but going through the kind of person-to-person sales just gave us a lot of feedback, shaping what people connect with, and shaping a lot of what we're doing finally now that we have more resources in terms of like building out solving the problems that exist with hammocks, how to hang it, where to hang it, the weatherability of it, really leaning into product innovation and design, and like really owning, like in this next phase, the IP behind what we're developing. Because what we realize is that in the artisan sector, a lot of, and just in general, like all products, Amazon that you find all over the place, people go to there's a handful of factories that manufacture things, and people go to them and they just buy off the shelf products.
Oh yeah, manufacturing. That was another thing we didn't know anything about.
So learned a lot about how kind of products are made, and that it's basically most of the stuff we buy is just coming from the same factory with a different label on it.
Right.
And there's no long-term, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of longevity to those businesses. They're not being built to be like 100-year-old company. They're being built for, capitalizing on whatever trends taking place. And that's fine for the, both consumers and people running those companies. But for us, it was really important to build something that was going to provide long-term value to our weavers, and differentiate the company and provide, again, long-term sustainable impact, so that by the time we're done, the communities we're working in are out of poverty, or even well before we're done, which we're starting to see now. That was super important. So we leaned into that.
And something that I think, so I mentioned that we didn't have a lot of background. So in many cases, we, reinvented the wheel, or we invented these all new concepts that we thought we were making up, only to later learn they were like, the cutting edge of social enterprise thought leadership. And we're like, oh, well, that's brilliant. But one of the things that Joe felt really firmly about and was so good about was looking at sustainability from this very holistic perspective. So from day one, we were looking at, and how can this be a venture that's not just sustainable on one end or another, right? So we wanted it to create the same positive benefit for the makers and for the consumer. And part of creating that positive benefit for the makers is making sure that we have the margins to be able to continue this venture, and make sure that we are, running things efficiently, and we're not just being led by our good intentions. We're also having a business sense. And so it's like finding that balance between how do we make it this win-win for everyone? That was, I think, just like such a good concept that you had such a grasp of really early on.
The first sort of face-to-face and the learnings from that, did you learn about price? Was that the biggest question you were asking them, or was that the first question, right? Is this a good price point for you? Is it too cheap? Is it too much, right? I mean, that's obviously matures over time, the pricing model.
Yeah.
At first, we started with like, people were like, how much are these? And we were like, well, how much would you pay? It literally started that way.
Name your price. Huh?
It was. And I would just throw prices out there and see what people's reactions were. And you got to gauge it firsthand, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we set a price finally. And then when we started really trying to grow the business beyond just these direct sales at little markets around New England, we quickly learned that we weren't pricing well for scaling into more of a wholesale market and getting it into stores. And so we ended up increasing our price to make it more financially sustainable as a business.
I think we were like 20% under what we needed to be. And for like 2 years, we were like, well, we'll just have to make that work. I don't know.
Right.
And we finally got great, we got a bunch of things aligned and we raised our prices.
And sales went up.
Interesting. Because you think that did anything change in the process of it as far as like the materials change or anything like that? It was the same exact hammock and you were just like
same product, better presentation.
Yeah, we eventually, once we recouped a little, with increased margin, increased profit, we reinvested into the packaging. And so all of the hammocks now come packaged in a really nice custom-made canvas tote bag. That's also helped us expand our workforce. And that's a whole separate conversation in what we did there. But basically, it allowed us to reinvest in the product. But essentially, the hammock itself was the same. We added the woven labels, but
we made some upgrades based on like.
It seems like the color changes too a little bit. They were more vibrant and more like I don't know. They just seem like, dang, I've never seen a hammock like this before. That's what I remember. And that was years ago. I remember that.
When we first started, this is actually really funny. This might like demonstrate the challenges and benefits of an artisan model. But when we first started, it probably took 2 years to impress upon our weaving communities that it was important that each one look the same. So like if we sold a hammock that had a picture and it was blue and orange on the site, it couldn't be blue, orange, and a little yellow on the side because you ran out of yarn. So you just used some yellow that you found because people were, we had to explain, like they're seeing a picture of it. They want it to look just like that picture. And before, when we were first selling them at markets and things, every hammock was completely different, and we started to pick up on the trends and the patterns that people kind of liked. And now we continuously evolve the designs, which is, So, and I think, again, like if you look at what's out there in the hammock market, most of the things you'll see are, kind of off-white, army green, maybe an orange if you're getting real zany. And so it's fun for customers, that we have a custom design your own feature where you could make, to match your favorite team, choose the colors or to coordinate with your backyard or things like that. And that's only possible when you're doing this, individual handcrafted thing. It adds to that kind of individuality that I think we're lightly touching on before with the way artisan products are evolving.
Let's go back to, I think Joe had mentioned maybe 2014, or you mentioned when you did like the Unreasonable sort of event that really, I don't know if it triggered something, but it validated something. Was there sort of a moment where you're like, let's like just do this, like quit everything we're doing? Because I mean, I think it's a big deal to like say, I want to do this, make some sales, but then also like dedicating your like life to it is like a different step.
Yeah, I think what allowed us to kind of go in full time, there were a few things. The one, where the economy was. I think I had been laid off, and also we won a business competition and eventually got into the Unreasonable Institute.
So going from the Unreasonable Institute, when we entered the Unreasonable Institute, that was the first time we really professionalized our operations and set out with some long-term planning to say, okay, here's how we're going to reach. I think we set a goal of having $500,000 in revenue that year, and really just sketched out how we would get there. And they, it's such a great organization. They set us up with mentors who were specific to our field. And so we learned for the first time how to do wholesale, how to start like differentiating our products in the marketing in ways that we hadn't been before. And really went like gung-ho in that 2014-15 year. That was where I feel like, and one of the things that we slowed down on was kind of talking about the business. Because I think a lot of social entrepreneurs you've probably had on here, there's a lot of opportunities to talk about what you're doing and share your story. And it's, for us, that became more of a distraction and less of it took away from our attempts to get things done. You know, our business was always profitable from the beginning because that was what we set out as one of our precepts. Yeah. And so we really just went like 3 years heads down in the work. I don't really remember them. That's unreasonable. Just like set us into a place where we're really like, okay, let's.
Yeah, it allowed us to,
revenue.
you know, it was a 5-week incubator where you're in the same house with mentors and 12 other entrepreneurs working heads down on your company, and you're surrounded with mentors that are specific to your industry, and that was critical.
Yeah.
And we came away with a strategic plan that was written, that we can follow, that was adaptable, that we can pivot on. But like for the first time, we had a roadmap, and we weren't just kind of like selling blindly, just kind of like tinkering. It was like, okay, this is real. People are connecting with it. We have an opportunity to build a real company. Let's surround ourselves with the right people and take it from there.
And they helped us boil it down too, because I think originally we felt like our mission was all of these different things. Like now it's really easy for us to say like, well, our mission is to create jobs for mothers in rural Hill Tribe communities that enable them to, you know, for their families to flourish. But at that time we said, well, we want to help preserve these cultures, and we're diverting people from slash and burn, so it's also good for the environment. And it's like, you know, we want these people to have the good job, but like, what communities are we working in? What, you know, and we had like all these like theoretical questions that we were getting caught up in. And what Unreasonable helped us do was focus down to say the best way for us to create change is to sell more hammocks so we can create more jobs, primarily, and secondarily to become a more successful company so we can help other people learn how to do what we're doing, because there's such a huge opportunity here. Artisan activity is the second largest employer in the developing world. And there's so, you know, only in the last few years have we really started to see companies pop up that are sustainable from a financial and a style perspective, as well as their, you know, heart and right place mission.
What is the community, what's your conversations with them like now over this long period of time where you really built a relationship with them, right? I mean, over time, what's sort of, how's that relationship sort of just like blossom? And is it the same people you like originally went and found and worked with?
I mean, at first I really miss being back there because obviously this year we haven't been able to visit.
Sure.
So that's tough just because it's always brings everyone so much joy. But I mean, they are just amazed that so many people all over the world are loving the products that they're making, and they're constantly like, who is buying all of these hammocks? I mean, they're just but they love it. It brings them so much happiness. And
I mean, we've been going to that same village, like you said, almost 10 years now, and so seen like people who were little kids, you know, when we were first there, driving now. And there's there's kind of a long history. We've seen kids outgrow their parents because they've gotten such improved childhood nutrition that, you know, when I'm 5'3", and when we go to the Malawi village, I tower over, you know, most of the older people, and the kids are outgrowing me, which is like a huge, you know, just this anecdotal, but a marker of the success that we feel like it's having. So,
and they're going to, the Weavers are sending their daughters to college for the first time, which is really unheard of in a lot of the areas where we work. So amazing all around. It's been fun, but they're just really appreciative that people are connecting with the products. They're a huge part of, you know, our company. And so
and I think they enjoy the fact that we take on a lot of, you know, all that they need to do is weave the hammocks.
Do what they do best.
Yep.
And don't have to worry about it. So they're enjoying it, right? I mean, they enjoy it rather than have to dealing with like the customer side of things, right? And sending stuff back, and you know,
we go over there and they're just like standing outside on these like shady verandas they've built, like weaving while like chickens and dogs run around, and kids are playing, and I'm like, oh, this kind of seems nice.
It's like we want to take that life and like really, you know, empower the people that are buying the hammocks to live similarly, to enjoy the little things, community. And it's such a beautiful, it's this kind of comes full circle once everyone's doing well. And so, it's something that everyone gets great joy out of.
Yeah, that's one of the funny things that that we faced like early on and continue to work through. But especially in the Malabri tribe, the first tribe that we worked with, there's a big cultural value around relaxation. And so and like to the point that once their like basic needs are met, they don't want to work anymore.
Right.
And so we would be like, please leave more hammocks. Like, no, I've got enough money. Yeah, maybe next month.
We're taking a 4-day weekend.
Exactly. And so that was, it's one of those interesting things where we had to build the business model around that and accept it. That's part of the things we're trying to spread. And so it's like very interesting when you're working across cultures. It's really important to listen before you
But their culture, pun intended, but their culture has like weaved its way into the brand, right? I mean, that's kind of what when you go to the site and like, just the product and all the photos and like the marketing, it has that feel of like their culture, really, right? And you're kind of embedding that into North American culture, but global culture, right? Just people who live in more dense areas rather than rural communities.
I mean, these are people who, like, in their lifetime faced starvation and forced imprisonment in camps, and yet have such a strong value on relaxation and enjoying life that even after escaping the depths of poverty, they still aren't going to become workaholics, to protect themselves in the future. They still know that they want to enjoy every day. And that is just, I struggle to live that message myself, and I want to bring it to more people.
I wanted to go back to something you mentioned earlier about the IP part of things, right? I thought that was interesting, and I think that's, I don't know if the Throne product is like your first dip into that toe, right? In developing that, whether it's a trademark, whatever it is. I mean, it's like amazing, right? And also you don't have to hang it, right? Could fit anywhere. Right. So was that sort of the idea that came from that? Was it's kind of hard to have IP around like the actual weaving aspect. We have to create like a product that is just to us,
Yeah. As we started developing new products, we looked at how do we, first off, like what we wanted to do is make the hammocks more accessible to more people. And the way to do that is providing hanging solutions and building out our hammock concierge, which is like our customer service and kind of like help team. And the products, we wanted to develop the products to support that. And so the hammock throne is really the first foray into like hard goods, and gave us an opportunity to really tinker and come up with something that is like, creating a whole new category of relaxation furniture. Like, we hate to call it a hammock stand because it's aesthetically and functionally, it's unlike anything else. It's in a category of its own. Yeah. So that's, as we look to whether it's developing a new hammock or a hammock hanging solution or something else, how do we really identify the problem that a product problem and solve it with really good product design, rather than again just going and buying something that's off the shelf and putting our own label on it. Right. How do we innovate, and how do we also, because for us that's in line with our values of leaving the world a better place. So inventing and not reinventing necessarily, but like coming up with something totally new that adds value to people.
And we always try to look at things, from how it's made, right? The manufacturing story, but also the innovation in design and using the appropriate material. And those three things are kind of like the triumvirate of what we feel like is like a sustainable, worthwhile product to manufacture.
How did that even come into the thought process? Like, did you see something that triggered something and say, hey, I think we could do that? Or were you just drawing up a ton of different like product ideas and that one kind of just hit?
We knew we wanted to have a solution for the chair. Yeah. Our hanging chair is such an incredible product. It's really better than all the other hanging chairs out there. Like, I feel like it's the most differentiated of our products just naturally. And it's also one of the lower selling styles because it's hard. It's new to people. It's confusing. They're not sure how to hang it. And what's so cool about it is that you have the ability to kick back and have a full length hammock in just 3.5 feet of space, which means you can have it theoretically in a dorm room, right? Like your bunk. You could have it in a small apartment, and all these places that for the whole time we were starting our company, we didn't have any outdoor space. We didn't have any friends with any outdoor space, and so it's starting to figure out, okay, even if you don't have that perfect backyard, how can we make 15 minutes a day of relaxation accessible to you in a way that stands up to my very high aesthetic standards? And Joe's really, technically engineered like specifics and all of those things.
One of the topics that's is really interesting to me, especially just being in the social impact space so long. I usually, I've seen a lot of the now successful social entrepreneurs start with like that landing page, right? Or start on Kickstarter, right? Now they've made it kind of so far where you have like investors looking at it, right? Or the companies looking to acquire these brands now. And so the evolution's been really, really interesting. And I want to talk about like funding for a second, right? Because bootstrapping for so long is really tough, right? I've done it with cause artists, right? Like,
right.
it's a constant day to day, like brick by brick, building it up. But at some point, I think most entrepreneurs face that point where it's like to really take that next step. Maybe inviting more people on board, right? From a capital standpoint, but also that brings usually like advisory and sort of people who can create different pathways, whether for you case maybe get into sort of bigger stores and things like that. So what was the thought process? And tell us the raising money story. I mean, you kind of had an interesting experience with that.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, we looked at, okay, like we just talked to maybe a couple of people and we're like, okay, no one's going to fund a company. Like this is just not. And
where's your hacky stick?
The amount of time we would have taken to fundraise, we're like, let's sell product. We have a finished, let's get it out there. And so that's what we did. And eventually got to a point where we're like, we needed more money, but no one was going to fund a hammock company. We didn't have our plan together that we had after the Unreasonable Institute. Like things weren't really formulated to that level where it was investable. So we just continued grinding it out for a little while. And then through Unreasonable, we learned that, there are actually mission-driven investors. Like it opened us up to this whole world that we weren't aware of. And we also realized that we didn't feel like we were ready to bring on like an equity investor, but taking on debt because we were selling products. And we were able to structure a couple of loans from early advisors that have been absolutely critical for us, that allowed us to, instead of taking a traditional loan, the repayment was tied to sales. So a revenue-based repayment. So
that was with the BOMA Foundation. We should give them a shout out because they're so innovative, doing such a great job working with early stage social impact organizations where they just say like, our relationship will be our due diligence. Start out with a small loan, pay it back, we'll give you a bigger loan.
Yeah, I think
how do you spell that? How do you spell that? Just so I can put it in the show.
BOMA, BOMA.
Okay.
Yep, Ron and Marla Spolem.
Yeah, and we started out with like $6,000 loan, repaid that $30,000 after that. I think then another 30, then repaid that 50,000. Eventually got to, I think we had a $100,000 loan, and we kept repaying these loans and learning that this revenue-based repayment was working really well for us. But then we also got to a point where taking on debt was no longer, like we were growing at a rate where we needed some equity investment to make longer term investments into the business. And we went through a little bit of a process. Also, like through these years, we learned what the bigger opportunity was. It wasn't just hammocks. We're really starting to build a relaxation brand, and that meant more than this one woven product that we had. We were looking at how do we scale that? How do we make this so that it impacts more people, both on the consumer end as well as on the social impact side and the supply chain. And there were a lot of direct-to-consumer brands being built around the last 3 years, and we started talking to more traditional like venture capital investors.
Wait, can I interrupt you for a moment? I have a mildly controversial thing to say.
Ooh, okay.
Which is that after our experiences, with dabbling in fundraising and getting into these really exciting conversations with impact investors, I think that the impact investment space needs to take a look at itself and recognize that the reporting and the due diligence that they're putting onto these social impact companies, I mean, truly, we had a very difficult time finding investors that made sense to work with because they had such a need to micromanage and protect their investment, which is, first of all, to me, I was a political science major, so I don't know a lot about finance, but to me, the whole point of an investment is that there's some chance it will go wrong.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
And these same people without these same organizations, these same institutions, without batting an eye, would write a grant or make a donation to a company that's not getting back, and they wouldn't do. So I just feel like that the world of impact investment, again, not a major finance person, but as an entrepreneur, I found it untenable, and I basically said, Joe, I'm not going down this path anymore. And that was when we kind of started talking to friends who worked in the more traditional investment space, and it was a breath of fresh air. I mean, people were so, excited. I found the traditional investment space, people were incredibly excited about our impact. Nobody said, you're going to have to drop that. Maybe it's because we built a good business at that point and we had the confidence coming in. But I found it like so much more welcoming and enthusiastic and full of ideas, instead of just like, can you give me, I need an 82 report on your gears assessment. Okay, wait, I'm sorry. I know you mentioned 13 of the SDGs, but we really are looking for companies that fund 14 or more of the SDGs.
And it's a little bit of like, let's strive for perfection versus like just getting out there and doing things and learning as you go and improving.
And I think that's hurting the communities that they want to be helping. It's
I
slowing
100%
them down.
agree with you. I 100% agree with you. We're not taking it like small steps, right? We want to go to the mountaintop before we can even like, all right, well, how about we just start with like getting people jobs, right? Because then that will create education opportunities. It'll create clean water opportunities, right? I think instead of, we want to work with companies going to solve 14 SDGs. Well, that's great, because you know what, that company does not exist, right? It just won't exist. And if it does, it's probably not going to do a very good job at solving any of them, right? I mean, I think it's a great point, and I've seen it a little bit, just dipping my toe into looking at funding and getting the strategic partnership for cause artists. I've noticed similar things, and it's kind of frustrating. It's just like, well, I'm just gonna keep bootstrapping it until till it is what it is, right? But I think it's just a great point. Finding the right people is the most important part of this process. And I guess, did you eventually find it?
Yeah. So then I made a rule. Okay. So then I was Joe had a lot more patience. Joe has a finance background and I did not. So I did not understand this whole system, but I finally made a rule and I said, you know what? Fine. I'll take whatever investment. I don't care about the terms that much. You work those out. I just wanted to be with someone I would go on vacation with, because we're bringing someone into this company that we spent all the time building. I just want it to be someone who, like, when I look at the phone, I don't feel sad they're calling me.
Right. No, listen, that's a beautiful way to look at it.
Yeah. And so we ended up, should we go into what really ended up happening?
Yeah, things kind of played out not in the way that we envisioned necessarily.
So after building out this whole philosophy and thinking things through so deeply, and like having this big list of like, I would be willing to work with this firm.
Right.
We got a call.
We went on Shark Tank. I'll just skip ahead. We were invited to apply to Shark Tank. They saw our Kickstarter for the Hammock Throne, and we went on the show. Initially skeptical of the type of deals that you do on Shark Tank, but we knew it was going to be a great marketing opportunity, a way to get our story out and maybe get investment. But the benefit of it was this, like you were talking about, Grant, like the channels that open up through that, right? If you take on an investment through these people, one, they're very experienced with consumer businesses, but also they consider it a part of their job as the investor, just not to just be money, to be a conduit and to be a net. It was very nerve-wracking because they don't have a deep history of working with social enterprise.
Yeah. It's almost laughed at too sometimes when it goes on there, right? Like it's
right. Yeah.
It's part. It's just off-putting a little bit. It's just weird how they like they like disrespect it for no reason at all. Like it's just
and I
weird.
think it's evolving. I think their
I
attitude
agree,
has
because
been
I think
evolving.
companies like you walk in, it's like, well, your business model is legit. Like even if you didn't have the mission side of things, it doesn't matter. The company stands on its legs on its own, right?
But you give up the control, right, of the edit. So you don't know
Good
how
call.
it's going to
Yeah,
look.
for sure.
And we saw Liz from Seiko Designs. I mean, one of the most incredible and well-spoken entrepreneurs with a very similar mode of operation and business model and goals as ours. And they just like, the Sharks just did not want to hear the great things they were saying at that time a few years back. And so I had a lot of trepidation about going on. I was very nervous.
I think that's to me, that's a big, it could, yeah, I think it definitely could obviously do very positive things too, but some people take bad deals and, it's,
And we had a lot of responsibility. We had hundreds of people, back in our weaving community who we promised we were working to make this financially sustainable. So we felt really, like we needed to go in there strong. We couldn't be swayed by the lights or, the pressure. And it is in a high pressure environment.
Yeah. And just before going on, we learned that they had a guest shark on the show, Daniel Lebetsky, the founder of Kind, who is has an incredible history in philanthropy and building his company from a similar value standpoint, and just an incredible track record and things he's doing
with hustle.
Yeah, and he's built Kind, literally going door to door selling Kind bars, and like his story also took him 10 years to get to where he is.
And so then I immediately completely switched roles, and I was like, "No, we have to go on. We have to get this."
For sure. No, 100%. That matters. Who's there, right? Because
we felt like we had a legitimate chance to actually get an investor. And I should say we were excited about some of the other sharks too, because we knew the value that they can bring for building the consumer side of the business. But we also were like, Daniel connects with us. With our mission, we knew that coming in.
We wouldn't have to educate him on why we were doing things the way we were doing them.
Right.
And that's what led. We found out from looking at all these different investments that takes a lot of time if you aren't feeling like simpatico on those lines, I think.
And so we ended up securing our first major investment in a place where we didn't even think we would. Ever.
Go back and see what happened. Not everyone who's listening to the show has seen.
I'll link to it, but
Okay. Well, in the end, I believe we went into the tank asking for $400,000. I was convinced we didn't need any investment, but I really wanted Daniel. And then he offered us $1 million to invest in our company for a larger stake. And it was, just the best decision that we could have made. Yeah. It's been incredible working with him, and being resourced has freed us to make so many more leaps, just in the last short few months. It's changed the way that we're doing business for sure.
That probably, did that allow you to do like sort of I know you did the Kickstarter through the Throne thing, but has that sort of maybe escalated the idea of obviously scaling that, but also looking at it into more product lines, because you're able to think deeply about those things rather than like dealing with other stuff before.
And product development is expensive. So if you have to wait and launch one thing at a time, unless you're resourced. In this case, we've been able to really speed up our product roadmap. We've brought on teams that are actually like expert in all of the things that we were just, kind of figuring out mostly on our own, and so now it's such a different world to be able to say like, oh, I've got a good idea, and then kind of like kick it out to a few people and let someone run with it, versus being like, I've got a good idea. Oh man, that's going to be a lot of work for me to figure out.
Right. Yeah.
And we've been working that way for a long time, where anytime we thought of a good idea, then we had to do it ourselves. I see you.
I know exactly. To do one product really, really good is really, really hard, right? Yeah. To do one product at some semblance of scale, right? A physical product. There's so many variables that go into that it's really it's just hard to really do right? Like you said before, like adding like a simple like canvas bag, right, for the hammocks, right? We could say that's like, oh, it's just a canvas bag. Oh, that's a good but like that's not like a weekend thing and it's done, right? That's a probably more time than you thought to even implement that one thing.
Yeah, and then we ended up like with that project, we ended up starting an entire like cut and sew program down in the city of Prague that's diverting people from sweatshop factories. And we were just like, oh man, there's like implications to everything you do when you start, expanding out beyond your core. And so finding that balance between focus and vision.
So I'll end on the last two questions. One is when that capital came in, when you took that investment, was the idea to really go after like e-commerce a lot more, or was it to go and try to get into wholesale, right, and sell to Targets or whoever at that level, or was it just a mix of both?
I would say more towards shifting our business towards the direct to consumer model, but really focusing on the wholesale side, focusing on really good strategic partnerships.
Yeah.
We had a couple of partnerships already in the works, and kind of like doing similar things around hospitality, retailers that can really tell our story.
Places where people can really try out the hammock and experience it as opposed to just picking it up off of a shelf. That's kind of the vision that we have going forward, at least until people might be expected to have familiarity with how it's going to feel.
Almost like a partnership with like, obviously now is not a great time, but like hotels, like their lobbies and stuff like that, or hotel rooms, like that could be also like a great space where like just getting Marriott as a client would obviously like change everything, something like that.
I think if they're listening, they should call us. We're willing to take the long game on this one.
I think the hospitality industry is like ripe for, I don't know, innovation is the right word, but like disruption in the way that like people feel like go into a hotel and kind of like, now sucks, right? Because people it's still a little different right now. But I think as we hopefully normalize maybe next year, I think I see with the airlines, like Delta, like I think like every product that they have when you get like your snacks and stuff, they're all B Corps. And Listen headphones are in first class on Delta flights, right? So I think you're seeing these sort of like massive companies like look at their offerings and be like, we could probably do better than this, right? Like just Marriott having like just a janky shampoo like that's in their rooms. Like why not have a strategic partnership, with somebody that can have a product in there that's great. And obviously if you walk in, you have like a hammock chair, and that's going to differentiate you from like a Holiday Inn or something.
Yeah. I think you're right. Like I think individual consumers have been voting with their pocketbooks for quite a while, this last decade.
For sure.
But I think that these larger corporate partners are going to see the opportunity to like put some shine on these companies that are trying to get a leg up and receive some of that shine back. Like I will happily calculate out how many thousands of dollars, Marriott can return into our communities to help them tell the story of what this is a real story. It's not corporate whitewashing or what's it called, greenwashing. This is a real change that they can help create. So I do agree. Yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at with key partnerships now, is people who can help us move the needle in terms of the exposure that we have and the way that we get into people's lives.
Last question is we kind of started with the journey, right? So we're going to end with the future. And I know that's right now can be difficult to answer because there's a lot, there's just, it's just a lot of circumstances right now. But as you look maybe, 3 to 5 years down the line, what does that look like? What do you hope that it looks like, for the company and for you guys?
Yeah. So I love that question, and we're thinking about it a lot right now. And heading into, where we are today, we would already been focusing around like, what do hammocks represent in people's lives? And we've heard all these stories repeatedly of how the hammock is allowing them to transform their backyard. Even if like when they wake up and have a cup of coffee and look out in the yard and see the hammock, it brings them joy. It like puts them in seeing the product puts them in a different mindset. And so we really wanted to empower people to make relaxation a daily ritual in their lives and continue to take the kind of ethos that's encapsulated within a hammock and turn that into more of an experience in your home, in your backyard, and continuing to evolve our product line to really bring that, empower you to, again, make relaxation a daily ritual, a daily practice.
Yeah.
That can mean a lot of things. I realize that's a little vague, but also staying hyper-focused around hammocks and solving the how to hang problem, but also like doing more content and empowering people again, to practice relaxation. And so that's, we really hope that we can achieve that through more innovative products like the hammock throne, create this category of relaxation furniture, and doing that all through maintaining our supply chain, which will be a really great challenge we're excited for.
Maintaining the positive impact in our supply chain.
Yeah, exactly. And continuing to empower more of our workforce, and doing things, whether it's, if it's not a woven good, like with the wood we're sourcing, looking to reforestation initiatives, and really building out a bigger business that's doing things on the supply chain side that's in line with our core values and how we started. And so that's kind of this next phase that we're entering right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think we've learned how to be, hopefully we've learned how to be like both focused and have vision. And that's the goal right now, is to say, we know what types of things we see that we want coming up. We know that we definitely have this very clear vision that we will only be a company that's creating positive impact through the way that our things are made. But also, like, things are going to happen in the world. Things are going to change. We're going to stay fluid. We got to keep on seeing the opportunities that comes next, because it's not it's not just about the bottom line. It's about, there's already hundreds of people that are depending on us, thousands of people that are depending on us. And, the goal is that there'll be even more people that we're helping to empower in the future. So it is a different level of responsibility when you look at, like a time right now, failure is not an option.
Yeah. It's difficult when you have people that depend on you, right? And depend on, people, consumers, buying things. It could be a tough position to be in when things are like this, which is hopefully, but just trying to get through this time to where it's like, we need to get past this thing. Has it been a struggle for, do you see sales down just because people are staying home more, right? So sales might be up, right? It's just a weird thing.
It's been
the biggest fear that we had was like that these communities that we work in, we're trying to empower people through the work that they have. What they have experienced in the past has been like, the second that there's a dip in the global economy, these places at the bottom of the economic pyramid are the first to experience it. And so for us, it's been, we feel the pressure to continue creating the good work. We also want to assure them that it'll be there.
Like, one thing we did was create our own little stimulus package with our partnership with Kiva, where we were able to provide capital that secured everyone's job through the next 12 months. And that was really critical. Like, we did that really early on so that people had the security.
And we didn't lose our workforce too. People might, because of the instability, even though they would make a lot less money if they were like participating in slash and burn agriculture, it might feel like the safer bet if we're not there to create reassurance, like this empowering job will still be there.
Right. But when we did that, we also didn't know what sales would be like. And we started seeing a lot of the wholesale business was, obviously, stores are closed. That took a major hit. We weren't getting paid on certain orders and things like that. But closing the investment when we did was really amazing timing for us. And then pivoting to more of a direct-to-consumer model was incredible. And that allowed us to make up and exceed where we were last year, and really bring this relaxation into people's backyards. And as people are spending more time at home, really provide something that's really of value and that people are benefiting from. And so that's helped our company for sure. But it's been, a little bit of it came with some initial challenges that we worked through.
For all the other entrepreneurs out there, I just know how hard it is to push forward and focus when you're constantly worrying about the bottom line, right? That's been our existence for a really long time. And this just circles back to what it would be so great if our impact investment space was there with kind of open wallets to support the good work that's been going on, so that people can keep on working the way we have to grow in this time and to secure their communities, instead of the stress alone can be so damaging to the forward progress that you've worked to build up. So I just feel for all our fellow entrepreneurs out there struggling through this time, and I believe in you guys.
last thing I'll say is when you're talking about like these partnerships, and you're talking about doing like more stuff around relaxation. I was like, what would be cool is that like if somebody ordered a hammock and they get it, and then we open the box to get like a free audiobook from Audible, right? Like having those partnerships where, or like they get
Exactly.
3 months premium to like the Calm app, right? There's so many
Right.
meditation apps out there. The box, man, that's such an advantage
Yeah.
to have like a person like not just open the box, like throw it away real quick, but like you get a hammock, you're laying it down, like you're opening it like slowly, you're taking everything out, you're reading the materials. Like that's a real advantage you have where like people like super focused on opening your package. Like there's a wealth of stuff you can do there, man. So that's going to be pretty cool. See how you can innovate that space. But
We're excited for that for sure.
Thank you so much.
I love where your mind goes with these partnerships. You got me inspired.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I mean, there's very few social impact brands that you make it this far. Honestly, man, like really do like. I mean, like you said, build that 100-year brand. I think it's really cool to see like the original sort of social entrepreneurs kind of coming out of that class, 5, 6, 7 years ago. That's just it's beautiful to see the success that people are having, man, and really kind of showing people how you can build a business in spaces you just may not ever imagine, right? I'm sure you wake up one day, it's like, we have a hammock business, like, right? I mean, it's not like you're not 8 years old being like, I want to be a hammock entrepreneur, like it's
I want to be a pirate.
Yeah, so it's also where things can take us, and travel is always a big part of inspiration for everybody, man. I always say this, but I would say 80%, 90% even of people I interview, travel has always been the inspiration for why they do things. And right now we don't have much of that right now, so we're having a wasted year of inspiration. But
get in the hammock, let your mind travel. Just let it take you. Don't just think of how much money you're saving by just simply getting into a hammock. It's so much better than an airplane seat in an economy.
unless they rip out all the seats and they put hammock chairs in all the airplanes, then that would be cool.
You can finally retire when that happens.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
All right,
well, Grant, thank you so much for
having a great time, man. It's been fantastic chatting, and best of luck rest of the year, obviously, and